I always believed that education was my ticket to a better life. As a child, I found sanctuary in books and schoolwork, dreaming of one day going to college and building a future I could be proud of. Growing up in a quiet suburban town, I was an obedient daughter who rarely asked for anything beyond paper pencils and permission to study late. My teachers praised my curiosity. Classmates teased me for being a bookworm, but I wore that nickname like a badge of honor. For me, learning was more than just grades, it was hope. Hope that I might achieve more than what life in our modest home promised. Hope that I could make my family proud while carving out an identity of my own. My family, however, revolved around a different son. That son was my younger brother, Ryan. From the day he was born, our father fixated on him as if he carried all the family's aspirations on his tiny shoulders. I have memories of Dad cradling baby Ryan, whispering, "My little man is going places," with a broad grin I seldom saw directed at me. As we grew, Dad's expectations for Ryan only swelled. For every new interest Ryan had, Dad would invest wholeheartedly, sending him to summer science camp, buying him a guitar when he wanted to learn music, even hiring a private soccer coach when Ryan tried out for the team. I admired my brother's talents and cheered him on, but a quiet ache settled in my chest whenever I compared it to what I received. My needs were minimal, and because I never made a fuss, I rarely got any special attention. I was the self-sufficient one, the reliable one. If I came home with an A, Dad would nod with a perfunctory good job before asking me to help set the table or fold laundry. If Ryan scored even a B, it was an occasion for celebration. Dad would take us out for ice cream, ruffle Ryan's hair, and proclaim how smart his son was becoming. I learned to swallow my envy and loneliness in those moments. Dad worked hard to provide for us, so I told myself it wasn't my place to complain. Mom often reminded me gently, "Your father loves you in his own way. He just has high hopes for your brother." She'd say it as if trying to convince herself as much as me. My mother was the gentle buffer in our household, quick to soothe tensions and excuse Dad's favoritism. She'd flash me a sympathetic smile when Dad overlooked my achievements, and later slip me a small treat or an extra hug as consolation. But even Mom's comfort couldn't ease the resentment growing inside me. I never dared voice it. On the surface, I remained the dutiful daughter, convinced that if I kept my head down and excelled quietly someday, Dad might finally see me. That hope burned brightly as I entered my senior year of high school. I was 17 and on track to graduate near the top of my class. College brochures piled up in my room, state universities and scholarship programs, each glossy page a doorway to a new world. Late at night, I'd sit by the window under the street lamp's glow, poring over those brochures, while Ryan's snores drifted down the hall. In those still moments, I allowed myself to dream. I imagined attending lectures in grand halls, pulling all-nighters in a library, living on a campus buzzing with possibilities far beyond our little town. I could almost taste the freedom. I knew better than to share these dreams with Dad right away. Instead, I confided in my teacher, Mrs. Thompson, who eagerly guided me through college applications. Together, we searched for scholarships to make college possible. With Mom's quiet help sneaking postage stamps for the application packets, I sent out my applications and prayed. I kept it secret from Dad out of caution. I wanted to hand him a sure success, an acceptance letter, and financial aid, something that would make him proud and be hard for him to dismiss. When the first acceptance letter arrived, my heart soared. A crisp, white envelope came from my top-choice state university. Not only had I been accepted, they offered me a partial scholarship for my achievements. It wasn't a full ride, but it meant the world to me. I remember clutching that letter to my chest in my bedroom, tears of joy blurring the print as I read it over and over. I pictured the campus, the dorms, the new life that could be waiting for me. For the first time, I believed my father might actually be proud of me. I fantasized about the moment I'd show him the letter. Surely then he would smile wide, pat my back, maybe even hug me with the same warmth he showed my brother. The day I decided to tell my parents is etched in my memory. The scent of Mom's Sunday pot roast filled our small dining room as we sat for dinner. My hands trembled under the table, the acceptance letter folded neatly in my pocket. I waited until the plates were nearly empty, and Dad seemed content. Mom knew what I was about to do. She gave me the tiniest nod of encouragement. I cleared my throat softly. "Dad, Mom? I have some news," I began, trying to steady my voice. All eyes turned to me, Mom's filled with gentle expectancy, Ryan's briefly lifting from his phone, and Dad looking at me with mild curiosity. With a deep breath, I pulled out the envelope and handed it to him. "I got into State University," I said, my voice wavering with a mix of nerves and excitement. "They offered me a scholarship. It covers about half of the tuition." The words tumbled out. For a moment, silence. Dad took the letter, adjusted his glasses, and began to read. Mom pressed a hand to her mouth, her eyes already shining with happy tears. I glanced at Ryan. He looked up in surprise, maybe even a flash of pride for me, but then he went back to his phone as if my news didn't hold his attention for long. I waited for Dad's reaction, heart pounding. He read the letter slowly, then carefully refolded it. His face revealed nothing. Finally, he cleared his throat. "That's good," he said quietly. "We'll talk about this later." Then, without missing a beat, he turned to my brother almost eagerly. "Ryan, did you finish your application for the London exchange program? The deadline's coming up, isn't it?" Just like that, I ceased to exist at that table. The spotlight that had flickered on me for an instant was now back on my brother. I felt heat rush to my face. My throat tightened painfully. "Dad, did you hear me? I got in." "With a scholarship," I repeated, softer, almost choking on the words. Under the table, Mom's hand found mine and squeezed, as if to say she was proud of me even if Dad wasn't reacting. Dad gave me a brief glance, his eyes cool and distant. "I heard you," he said more curtly this time. "I said we'll discuss it later. Right now, our priority is making sure Ryan's future is on track." Each word felt like a slap. Of course, Ryan's future was the priority. It always had been. I shrank back in my chair as a mix of anger and devastation churned inside me. Mom opened her mouth, but no words came. She looked as stunned as I felt. Meanwhile, Dad was already rattling off advice to Ryan about essay topics and recommendation letters, talking as if nothing important had happened, at least nothing related to me. My achievement, my news lay discarded like an afterthought among the dinner plates. Blinking back hot tears, I pushed my chair back. "Excuse me," I whispered, voice trembling, and hurried out the front door. Nobody followed. Outside, the autumn air was biting cold against my hot cheeks. I stood on our porch, wrapping my arms around myself. The golden light of sunset fell on an empty street, doing nothing to warm the ice in my chest. I stared blankly down the road, wondering how my shining moment had been snuffed out so quickly. I had expected some reaction from Dad's surprise, maybe even reluctant pride, or at least a serious discussion about the logistics of college. But not this. His dismissal was worse than an argument. It was as if my dreams were so insignificant they didn't even merit debate. I wiped away angry tears. "He said we'll discuss it later," I whispered into the chilly evening air. "Maybe he just needs time." I tried to cling to that hope, but it felt like trying to hold water in cupped hands. Deep down, I was afraid. Dad's indifference felt ominous, like the heavy stillness before a storm. This wasn't the proud congratulations I had yearned for, nor even the resistance I had feared. It was a quiet, suffocating silence that felt alarmingly final. I stayed on that porch until my tears dried and the sky had turned a deep purple. I didn't know it then, but this uneasy calm was merely a prelude, the last gentle moment before my world would come crashing down. I didn't have to wait long to learn what later meant. That very night, long after the dinner plates were cleared and the house was quiet, Dad came to my room. He didn't knock, he rarely did. The door creaked open, and he stood there in the dim light of the hall, arms crossed. My heart clutched in my chest as I sat up on the bed, bracing myself. He held my college acceptance letter in one hand. "I've thought about it," he began quietly, stepping inside. He spoke with a cool, resigned authority that turned my blood to ice. "You're a smart girl. I'm proud of how hard you worked." A tiny spark of hope kindled in me was that praise. But then he sighed. "Sometimes life is unfair and we have to make sacrifices for the family." Sacrifices? The word dropped like a guillotine blade. I couldn't even find my voice to respond. He went on. "Your brother's opportunity in London is something we can't pass up. It's a prestigious program that could set him up for an Ivy League college later. He needs this, and it's not cheap." His eyes locked on mine, expression unmoving. "We have to prioritize Ryan's education. He's going to carry this family's name further than I ever could." It felt like I was falling the floor, giving way beneath me. "Dad, I can get scholarships too," I whispered, finally mustering words. "I already got one. I can work part-time, take out loans." He raised a hand to cut me off. "No, we can't support 2 kids in college at the same time. It's just reality." His voice hardened. "And we need you to step up now for the family. If you start working, you can contribute to the household. That will free up money for Ryan's tuition, his airfare, everything." A ringing filled my ears. "But I'm still in high school," I choked out. "I graduate in a few months. Can't I at least finish?" Dad's jaw tightened. "I know what year you're in," he said, impatience creeping in. "But the sooner you start earning, the better. You can always get your GED later." GED. He was willing to let me drop out immediately. My stomach lurched. "I'm so close to graduating," I pleaded. "I could work after school." He shook his head. "We need full time. Ryan leaves in June, and we have a lot of expenses coming up fast." His tone was final. "I already spoke to Mr. Reynolds at the hardware store. He'll take you on as a cashier starting next week." I stared at him, stunned. He had arranged a job for me without even asking? My throat ached with held-back tears. You decided all this already?" I whispered. Dad frowned, as if I were the one not understanding. "Of course I decided. I'm your father. This is what's best for everyone. Ryan will remember what we've all done for him one day." He stood, placing a heavy hand on my shoulder. "I know you wanted to go to college. I'm sorry, but education isn't the only path to success. You're strong. You'll find your way just like I did." I flinched away from his touch, hot anger flaring through my grief. "It's not fair," I managed, my voice cracking. "I did everything right." For a moment, something like guilt flickered in his face, but it vanished just as fast. "Life isn't fair," he muttered. Then more firmly, "This is final. I expect you to be up tomorrow ready to help your mother and me with whatever needs doing. And don't you dare make your brother feel guilty about this." Understood. I had no words left. My silence was the only answer. Dad took it as agreement. With a curt nod, he slipped out, closing the door behind him, as if we'd just discussed something as trivial as tomorrow's grocery list. The moment he left, I broke. I buried my face in my pillow and screamed until my throat was raw. I cried for my lost dreams, for the unfairness of it all, for the love and validation I'd never get from him. When my tears finally ran dry, I lay in a hollow daze, feeling like a part of me had died. By midweek, Dad had officially withdrawn me from school. I'll never forget the hollow look in my guidance counselor's eyes when I told her I had to leave just weeks before graduation. She pushed a pamphlet for the GED exam into my hands, her voice gentle and sad. Walking out of those school doors for the last time, I passed the trophy case, where my name was listed as an honors student and likely valedictorian. I had to bite my lip hard to stop it from trembling. In a matter of days, I went from a top student with a bright future to a dropout, all for family sacrifice. I started working full-time at Reynolds' Hardware as Dad had arranged. The labor ringing up sales, stocking shelves, cleaning up isn't the worst part. The worst part is knowing why I'm there. Every paycheck, Dad takes a cut for household expenses, which I know means funding Ryan's new life abroad. What little money I keep covers my bus fare and a few personal items. There's no room for saving, no chance to escape. At home, everything revolved around Ryan's upcoming departure. Each evening, Dad and Mom sat with him planning out his travels, gathering documents, shopping for the things he'd need. I hovered at the edges of their conversations, expected to help, yet mostly ignored. One Saturday, I found myself in Ryan's room, helping Mom fold his clothes into a new suitcase. I bit my tongue until I tasted blood, just to hold back my resentment. At one point, I heard Mom gently tell Ryan, "You know your sister has made this a lot easier for us. You should thank her." He looked up in mild surprise, as if the thought had never occurred to him. Then he shrugged and walked over to give me a quick hug. "Oh, thanks, sis," he said, smiling the bright smile of someone whose mind is elsewhere. "I really appreciate it." Before I could respond, he was back to excitedly chatting about how amazing London was going to be. It wasn't cruelty on his part. I was simply a background character in the grand adventure of his life. In that moment, I realized I couldn't even properly hate my brother for what was happening. He was too wrapped up in his own excitement to understand what his gain had cost me. The day Ryan left for London, we all went to the airport to see him off. It felt surreal, like I was watching someone else's family. Mom fussed over his collar and wiped happy, sad tears from her eyes. Dad radiated pride I'd never seen, clapping a hand on Ryan's shoulder in front of the departure gate. "Make us proud, son," he said, voice thick. "All our sacrifices are so you can succeed." He cast a brief glance my way as he spoke of sacrifices, then pulled my brother into a bear hug. When it was my turn, Ryan wrapped me in a warm embrace. "Take care, sis. I'll bring you something cool from London," he promised. I mustered a smile and whispered, "Good luck," hoping he didn't hear the break in my voice. I wanted to mean those words genuinely, but my heart was too battered to feel anything but envy and sorrow just then. After his plane took off, Dad walked taller, as if sending his son abroad was the crowning achievement of his life. On the car ride home, he was almost cheerful. "That boy's going to do great things," he kept saying to Mom, who nodded and dabbed at her eyes. Then Dad cleared his throat and addressed me for the first time in a while. "You should ask Mr. Reynolds if you can start taking some extra shifts now that your evenings are free," he said, not unkindly, just matter of fact. "With Ryan gone, we'll need to adjust our budget." I stared at the back of his head, disbelief and hurt churning in my gut. Even now, all he saw was what more I could give. I murmured, "Okay," and turned to gaze out the window. The world outside streaked by bright spring skies, neat suburban houses utterly unchanged, while my world had been turned upside down. And so my brother flew off toward his bright future, and I sank fully into the shadows of mine. Every day that passed brought another small injustice, another shift I had to cover, another moment of being overlooked or ordered around. Each one pushed me deeper into a well of pain and simmering anger. I learned to endure in silence because what else could I do? My hope was gone. All that remained was a growing quiet fury buried under years of obedience and hurt. The next few years were a blur of drudgery and despair. I worked as many hours as I could, full days at the hardware store, and extra evenings at a diner to help cover the ever-mounting expenses of Ryan's education. At home, Dad spoke only of Ryan's triumphs at college, his high grades, his internships, the honors he racked up. Meanwhile, I became a ghost in the house. My role was to cook, clean, and hand over my pay. He rarely even looked at me except to bark orders or remind me to be grateful we were all doing our part. I lost touch with the few friends I'd had. I was too ashamed to reach out. I had nothing but misery to report. Loneliness settled over me like a constant shadow. Mom tried in her gentle ways to comfort me when she could. An extra hug here, a whispered, "I'm sorry" there. But she was as trapped as I was in Dad's world. In my darkest moments, I wondered if life was even worth enduring. One night, despair nearly got the better of me. I even sat at the table with a bottle of whiskey and a handful of pills ready to end it all. But at the last second, I broke down and threw the pills away, clinging to a stubborn spark of hope that refused to die. My breaking point came about 3 years after I left school. By then, I was 20, and Ryan had just finished his prestigious private college with honors. Dad was over the moon when Ryan got accepted into an elite MBA program for grad school. To celebrate, he insisted on a special dinner at home. I cooked the meal and served it while Dad actually opened a bottle of champagne for him and Mom. They toasted as I cleaned dishes in the background. I felt like hired help at someone else's party. As they talked excitedly about Ryan's future scholarships loans and how Dad would find the money to pay whatever else was needed, I realized there was no end in sight to the sacrifices expected of me. No matter what I had given up, it would never be enough. That night after the celebration, I retreated to my room. From the back of my closet, I pulled out a small metal cash box and set it on my lap. Inside was my secret escape fund, $452, in assorted bills painstakingly saved over years from diner tips and a few gifts Mom had managed to slip me on holidays. It was a pitifully small sum, but it was my lifeline. I imagined using it to finally take the GED exam, maybe enroll in a community college course. Sometimes I even fantasized about buying a bus ticket to anywhere and starting fresh where Dad couldn't reach me. I spread the money out, counting it for the 100th time, trying to muster the courage to make one of those fantasies real. I was so absorbed that I didn't hear my bedroom door open. Dad's voice cut through the silence. "What are you doing?" he asked quietly. I jumped, heart jolting into my throat. He stood in the doorway, arms crossed his gaze, zeroing in on the cash scattered across my bed. I scrambled to my feet, instinctively moving to hide the money behind me. It was too late. His eyes narrowed. "Is that money you've been holding back?" he asked, in a dangerously calm tone. My mouth went dry. "It's just savings." From my tips, I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. He stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. My pulse was thundering in my ears. "Savings," he repeated. "All this time, I've been scraping together every penny to keep this family afloat, and you've been stashing money away for yourself. It's not like that." I protested, backing up a step as he advanced. "I only saved a little. I didn't want to be completely empty-handed." After everything this family has done for you, you hide money." Dad's voice remained dangerously low, but I could see the fury in his eyes. "I have sacrificed my retirement, my savings, taken loans, all to give Ryan the opportunities he deserves. And you?" He shook his head in disgust. "You're hoarding tips as if you're one in need. What do you even plan to do with it, huh? Run away. Leave us after all we've done." His accusation, his utter lack of shame at what he was admitting, made something snap inside me. A lifetime of fear and obedience fought with a surge of indignation. My hands balled into fists at my sides. "All you've ever done is take from me," I shot back, trembling with rage. "I gave up everything for this family, and you call me selfish for saving a few dollars." "Watch your tone," he snarled, stepping closer. I could smell the sharp tang of champagne on his breath. "You live under my roof." "Not anymore," I cut in, surprising myself. My heart was pounding like I might faint, but I didn't stop. "I'm done living under your roof and under your thumb. You don't want me to have a life. Fine. I'll find one without you." His face contorted with rage at my defiance. For a split second, I thought he might actually strike me. And then he did. The slap whipped my head to the side, sending a shock of pain through my cheek and jaw. I tasted blood where the inside of my lip cut against my teeth. I raised a hand to my face, eyes wide with disbelief. Dad had never hit me before. We stood in stunned silence. His chest heaved, and my ears rang. In the doorway, I realized Mom was standing there, drawn by our shouting. She gasped when she saw the red mark blooming on my face. "Thomas, what are you doing?" she cried, rushing forward. He threw up a hand to hold her back, his glare never leaving me. "If you walk out that door, don't bother coming back," Dad growled at me, voice low and shaking with emotion. "You think you can survive without this family? Go ahead and try. But you leave now, you are no daughter of mine." My vision blurred with tears of pain, of fury, of heartbreak. The father I had once longed to make proud had finally truly disowned me in his heart, and strangely, instead of breaking me, it set me free. I stepped around him, wiping my eyes with the back of my hand. I went straight to the closet, grabbed a small canvas bag, and began shoving what little I owned into it. The cash box of money went in on top. Mom was sobbing, pleading with both of us. "Please don't do this. We're family. Thomas, apologize. Let's talk, please." Dad said nothing more. He just stood aside, breathing hard, as I walked out of my room and then down the hall toward the front door. My mother trailed me, her hands hovering like she wanted to hold on to me, but didn't dare in front of Dad. At the door, I turned back for a final look. Dad's face was stone, but his eyes were a storm of anger and maybe shock at how far this had gone. Mom was pale and trembling, tears streaming down her cheeks. I pulled the front door open and stepped out into the warm summer night, closing it firmly behind me. I walked for hours, powered by adrenaline and anguish, until the streets grew unfamiliar. Eventually, near dawn, I found myself at the 24-hour bus station downtown by dawn. I sank onto a bench in the corner, hugging my bag to my chest. I had no destination in mind, only the knowledge that I couldn't go back. In the dim, fluorescent light of the nearly empty station, I felt truly alone. Everything I owned, just a change of clothes, a few $100s, and my newfound freedom fit into the bag at my feet. I touched my tender cheek and winced. The physical sting was nothing compared to the ache inside my chest. Rock bottom. I had heard the term, now I was living it homeless, cut off from my family with no plans and nowhere to go. I fought down a rising panic. This was what I'd chosen, or had been driven to, and there was no turning back. As the first hint of dawn light seeped through the station's windows, I forced myself to take a steady breath. "You wouldn't last a month without us," Dad had said. A part of me was still terrified he might be right. Yet, amid the fear and grief, a sliver of defiance remained. He had taken so much from me, but he no longer controlled me. I was free now, for better or worse. I didn't know what would come next, and the unknown was terrifying. But sitting in that bus station, I made myself a promise I would prove my father wrong. I would survive, and one day I would find a life worth living on my own terms. That fragile vow was the only thing I held on to as the sun rose on my first day truly alone. Dawn of my new life arrived quietly, with no fanfare and no guarantees, only freedom and uncertainty. After the initial shock of leaving home subsided, I found myself fueled by a fierce determination I hadn't felt in years. I was free of my father's control. Now I had to figure out what to do with that freedom. Alone in the city, with just a few $100s, I knew I needed help and a plan. And I knew exactly who I could trust, Mrs. Thompson. It took 2 days for me to work up the courage to contact her. I remembered the phone number on the old business card she'd given me back in high school just in case. My hands trembled as I dialed, half expecting the number to be disconnected or for her to have forgotten me. But when I croaked out, "Mrs. Thompson, this is..." I don't know if you remember me." She immediately exclaimed my name, her voice warm and concerned. In moments, the words were tumbling out of me, how I'd left home, how I wanted to get my life back on track. She didn't ask for details right then. She simply told me to meet her at a cafe near the high school that afternoon. Seeing her again was like spotting a lighthouse through fog. Mrs. Thompson looked older than I remembered, a few more gray strands in her hair. But her embrace was just as kind and steadfast as it had been when I was her student. I broke down crying in that cafe, spilling years of pain and frustration over lukewarm coffee and a pile of napkins she handed me. She listened without judgment as I haltingly explained why I vanished from school, confirming what she had long suspected, that my father had forced me off the college path. Her eyes flashed with anger on my behalf, but she kept her voice gentle. "Listen to me," she said, leaning forward and squeezing my hand. "What happened to you was wrong, but it's not too late. You are brilliant, and you have so much life ahead of you. We can fix this, step by step." For the first time in ages, I felt a spark of genuine hope. Under her guidance, I enrolled in a GED preparation course at the local community center. By day, I waitressed at the diner where I'd picked up some night shifts before to pay for a tiny room I rented month to month. By night, I pored over textbooks and worksheets. It turned out I hadn't forgotten as much as I feared. Within a few months, I passed the GED exam with flying colors, high enough scores to make Mrs. Thompson tease that I had basically been valedictorian after all. Standing with my certificate in hand, I felt a swell of pride and possibility. It was a piece of paper most people earn as teenagers, but to me, it represented reclamation of my education, of my identity, as someone more than a dropout. I didn't stop there. With Mrs. Thompson's encouragement, I applied to the very state university I had once planned to attend, the one whose acceptance letter had set off my father's ultimatum. It felt like closing a circle when I wrote an application essay about overcoming adversity and finding my purpose. When I got the acceptance letter again, I cried both tears of joy and of mourning for that 17-year-old girl who should have had this moment years ago. This time, though, I had no one to show it to over dinner but myself. So I pinned it on my wall and silently promised to make the most of the second chance I'd been given. Attending college as an older student was daunting at first. I was surrounded by fresh-faced 18-year-olds while I was 21, carrying the invisible weight of everything I'd been through. But I reminded myself that I belonged here. I had fought to be here. I threw myself into my studies with a vigor fueled by years of denied opportunity. While working part-time to support myself, scholarships and grants helped with tuition. I took a full load of classes. Sleep became a luxury. Determination kept me going. In lecture halls and labs, I rediscovered the thrill of learning that I'd felt as a child, staying up late with a book under the covers. Every exam aced and every paper finished felt like a triumph, not just for the present me, but for the past me who had almost lost this future. I gravitated toward courses in computer science and business. Perhaps it was a nod to practicality. I knew I needed a stable career, but I also found genuine fascination in those fields. There was something empowering about learning how to build programs from scratch, to solve problems logically, and also to understand how businesses operate and grow. Piece by piece, I was constructing a toolkit for independence and success. In my second year, a class project of mine, a simple scheduling app for shift workers, won a campus innovation contest and drew the attention of a successful tech entrepreneur, Celeste. Impressed, she offered me an internship at her startup, which I eagerly accepted. Under Celeste's mentorship, I flourished. By the time I graduated at 24, she brought me on full-time at her company. It felt like stepping from one dream straight into another. Working in the tech industry was challenging and exhilarating. By my mid-20s, I had proven myself and was leading a small team, earning a solid salary. I moved out of my tiny rented room into a decent apartment and left behind the days of scraping by. Every promotion and project success was a quiet victory I savored in private. When self-doubt crept in, I only had to glance at my framed GED and college diploma to remind myself how far I'd come. At 26, with Celeste's blessing and some investor support, I took a deep breath and launched my own tech startup building workplace efficiency software. It was a terrifying leap. The first year was a blur of long hours and near failures, but we hung on. By 28, the company was turning a profit and gaining real traction. Despite all my success, I couldn't shake the desire to turn my past into something positive. I decided to quietly fund a scholarship at my alma mater for students who had faced hardships. I kept my name anonymous at first. It wasn't about recognition. It just felt like the right way to give others the chance I almost lost. Each year, a few students who might have been left behind got support, and that felt more rewarding than any paycheck or award. Then one day, as I reviewed the scholarship applications, I froze. There on the screen was my brother's name. He was asking for funding for a prestigious graduate program, and attached was a heartfelt letter from my father pleading that they could not afford it. After all his grand plans, my father had run out of money and was unknowingly begging me for help. I stared at the application hands trembling. In that instant, I realized fate had handed me a chance to set things right. The old fury I'd buried began to kindle anew. This was the moment I had unknowingly been waiting for. An opportunity to confront the past head on. I decided then and there that I would no longer remain anonymous. With steely calm, I phoned the scholarship committee coordinator and informed them that the benefactor of the fund, myself, would be taking a personal interest in one particular application. My heart pounded with a mix of nerves and grim satisfaction. My life had already transformed once, from voiceless victim to self-made success. Now, it was poised to transform again as I prepared to become the instrument of a long-awaited justice. I approached my revenge the same way I had rebuilt my life, with careful planning and cold determination. The moment I saw my father's letter and Ryan's plea for aid, a decade's worth of suppressed hurt and anger roared back to life. But I didn't let those emotions run wild. Instead, I harnessed them, shaping them into a precise instrument for justice. This would not be a reckless act of rage. It would be a calculated reckoning. First, I made sure my involvement in the scholarship was formally acknowledged. Until now, I had been a silent benefactor, but I informed the university's scholarship committee that I, as the primary donor, would personally oversee the final decision for this particular award. There was some surprise at my sudden interest, but as I was funding the scholarship, they readily acquiesced. I instructed them to notify the applicant, my brother, that the benefactor wished to meet him and a guardian for an interview regarding his application. It was an unusual step, but not unheard of for large donors to take a personal hand in evaluating candidates. I crafted the invitation letter myself, printing it on official university letterhead. As I typed out my own name at the bottom, my name, Scholarship Benefactor, I allowed myself a grim, tight smile. I wondered what my father would think when he saw that name. Our surname isn't uncommon, so perhaps he'd dismiss it as coincidence. Or perhaps he'd have a moment of uneasy doubt, a flicker of memory of the daughter he hadn't spoken to or about in nearly 10 years. Either way, they would come to the meeting. Of that, I was certain. They were too desperate for funding to turn down any chance, however strange or inconvenient. The meeting was set for 2 weeks later on campus at the university's alumni hall. Those 14 days felt surreal. By night, I slept restlessly, plagued by dreams of the past, of that fateful dinner when Dad told me Ryan was the priority, of standing on the porch with tears on my face as he ignored me, of the look in his eyes the night I left home. By day, I carried on as the polished professional I'd become, leading meetings, signing contracts, smiling during conference calls as if nothing was amiss. I didn't tell anyone what I was plotting. This confrontation was mine alone. Still, a few who knew me well sensed something in my demeanor, a tension behind my normally calm eyes. I thought of the girl I had been forced to surrender her dreams, and of the woman I had become who clawed them back. This was not about petty vengeance. It was about acknowledgement and accountability. My father needed to face what he'd done. And my brother, well, part of me was genuinely curious how he'd turned out and how much he understood about the cost at which his success had come. The day finally arrived. I drove to the university in the early afternoon, arriving well before the scheduled meeting time. The alumni hall was mostly empty at that hour, just a few staff bustling around setting up for some event later in the evening. I had reserved a small conference room, one lined with portraits of past donors and graduates, faces of people who had presumably believed in nurturing others' futures. How fitting, I thought, that in this room my father would have to confront the daughter whose future he discarded. I took a seat at the head of a long, polished table, placing a copy of Ryan's scholarship application in front of me. I had already read it multiple times. It was actually well written. My brother had grown into an articulate young man on paper, and he painted a compelling picture of a hard-working student in need of financial help. He made only vague reference to family difficulties and limited resources, glossing over the truth that our father had squandered a fortune on sending him to elite schools while neglecting any backup plan. Dad's own letter was more desperate, practically begging the committee to consider how much his son had accomplished and how much potential would be wasted without assistance. The irony was almost too much. Dad, who refused to plead my case to anyone when it mattered, now reduced to pleading for Ryan. And pleading unknowingly to me. I had to be careful to keep my emotions in check. I practiced in my mind how I would greet them, how I would maintain a business-like composure, even as I looked into the eyes of the man who had caused me so much pain. Would I feel a rush of triumph when I saw recognition dawn on his face? Would I feel guilt? I wasn't sure. To steel myself, I pictured something that used to fuel me on long nights of studying or coding. I pictured Dad's dismissive face at that dinner table years ago, him turning away, as if my dreams meant nothing. The familiar tightness of anger formed in my chest, and I embraced it. I would use that remembered hurt to stay cold and on task today. As the time neared, I heard footsteps and low voices just outside the door. My heart thudded in a heavy, steady rhythm. I stood spine straight, smoothing my blouse with jittery hands before clasping them behind me. This moment was a long time coming. A polite knock sounded. "Come in," I called, surprised at how calm my voice was. The door opened. My brother stepped through first. I recognized him immediately. He had the same youthful face from the photos I'd occasionally seen on social media. Yes, I had peeked at his public profiles a few times over the years, though he was taller and carried himself with a confidence that hadn't been there as a kid. He was 25 now, I realized. He scanned the room with a polite smile, meant for a stranger not yet registering me. Then my father walked in behind him, and time seemed to slow. Thomas, last name, looking much as I remembered, yet somehow smaller. He still wore a neatly pressed suit, but his hair had turned mostly gray, and deep lines etched his face, the marks of stress and age. He hesitated in the doorway, blinking toward me, as if expecting someone else to be standing there. Dad's gaze flickered over me without recognition at first. Why would he expect his estranged daughter to be standing here? He was clearly looking for someone else, someone he imagined as the wealthy benefactor. I saw Ryan extend a hand toward me, thinking I was an assistant or coordinator. "Hello, I'm Ryan. We're here to meet Ms. My last name about the scholarship." I let a beat of silence pass. I wanted to see the exact moment realization struck. I gave my brother a small nod, then shifted my eyes to my father. "You found her?" I said, addressing them both. "I'm, my full name, the donor of the scholarship." I watched as my father's polite, neutral expression crumbled into one of shock. His eyes went wide and all color drained from his face as if he'd seen a ghost, which, in a way, he had. Ryan's friendly smile faltered in confusion. He looked from me to Dad, not understanding yet, while Dad just stared at me, jaw slightly slack. In the heavy silence, I pulled out the chair at the head of the table and offered coolly, "Why don't you both have a seat?" Dad swallowed hard. "My name," he croaked my name, catching in his throat. He truly hadn't known what to expect today, but it certainly wasn't this. My brother's face finally changed as recognition hit him too. "Wait," he murmured, brow furrowing as he carefully took the seat I'd indicated. I don't understand. You're the one funding the scholarship. You two know each other." I met my brother's eyes, briefly feeling an unexpected pang at how lost he looked. Like the little boy who used to depend on me to teach him things when Dad wasn't around. But I pushed that feeling aside and sat down across from them. My father lowered himself into a chair as well, still speechless, his hands shaking ever so slightly as he set a worn leather briefcase on the table. I folded my hands on Ryan's application file and tilted my head, feigning polite curiosity. "Perhaps I should start by introducing myself properly," I said evenly. "As I mentioned, my name is my name. I believe we're already acquainted." My eyes locked onto my father's. "It's been a while, Dad." He flinched, as if I'd struck him. In that moment, I felt a grim sense of rightness. The tables had turned in the most literal way. He was on the other side of the table from me now in need, and I held all the cards. My revenge had begun. A heavy silence followed my words. My father's face had gone ashen. He opened his mouth, closed it, then opened it again, struggling to find anything to say. My brother looked from me to our father with dawning comprehension and horror. "My name," Dad finally managed, voice quivering. I was wrong. I made terrible mistakes." He swallowed hard, hands white-knuckled on the table. Ryan looked anguished. "I'm so sorry," he murmured. "I knew it wasn't fair back then, but I didn't know how to help you. I should have tried to reach out." Dad bowed his head. "I thought I was doing what was best for the family," he whispered. "But I see now how horribly I wronged you. Not a day goes by that I haven't regretted it." He reached a hand toward me across the table, a pleading gesture. "I was wrong," he whispered. "I thought I was doing what was right for the family, giving your brother a chance to succeed so he could help us all later. But I see now. I see what it cost you. I regret it. Not a day goes by that I haven't regretted it." Tears brimmed in his eyes. I was stunned to see them, but not moved to mercy. Ryan put a hand on Dad's shoulder, both to steady him and to interject. "Dad, let me speak." He looked at me with glistening eyes. "I knew what happened back then was unfair," he said quietly. "I was a teenager, but I knew. I just didn't know how to fix it. And by the time I realized how badly you'd been hurt, you were gone." He wiped at his eye quickly. "I'm sorry. I should have reached out to you when I got older. I was a coward, and I listened to Dad when he said to just focus on my studies." He bit his lip hard. "You have every right to hate us both." I hadn't expected my brother to apologize. Hearing it now tugged at something in me, but I couldn't let it derail my purpose. I drew in a steadying breath. "I appreciate that, Ryan," I replied, softening my tone just a touch. "I don't hate you. I never did. You were a kid, and you did what you were told. The choice was never yours." I shifted my gaze back to my father. But he was the adult. The choice was his. Dad's head hung low. I could barely hear his next words. "I thought I was doing what was right," he muttered. Then more firmly, "This is final." I expect he stopped short, realizing he was echoing that night long ago. His shoulders sagged. "I see how wrong I was. My name. And look at you now, all you've accomplished. I was blind to your potential." He let out a shuddering breath. "If it means not getting the scholarship, I understand. I'll find a way to support him somehow." Please don't punish your brother for my mistakes." I felt a tiny flicker in my chest. Perhaps the faintest hint of the validation I had longed for as a girl, hearing my father finally admit it. But the flicker died as quickly as it came. His regret, though real, came far too late. He was apologizing now because he needed me. Would he ever have sought me out otherwise? The decade of silence spoke volumes. My brother looked at me ashen. "This program means everything to me," he said quietly. "But not like this. Not if it costs any more pain." I closed my eyes, gathering my resolve. When I opened them again, I saw two broken men before me. One broken by his own, doing the other by a situation he didn't create. "I won't punish Ryan for your sins," I said at last. My father looked up, hope and confusion flickering across his face. "Ryan will receive the scholarship." "Thank God," Dad whispered, bringing a shaking hand to his mouth. "Oh, thank you." I held up a finger sharply. "I'm not finished." I leaned forward. "He will get the scholarship. But it's for him, not for you. You will get no credit and have no involvement whatsoever. The funds will go directly through the university." Dad nodded, eagerly, relief flooding his features. Of course. Anything you say." I shifted my gaze to Ryan. He looked stunned, trying to process that he would indeed get what he needed. "Work hard," I told him gentler now. "Make this count, Ryan. You were given every advantage growing up that I wasn't. I hope you appreciate that now." My brother nodded, wiping his face with the back of his hand. "I do. I swear I do. And I won't waste this chance." "Thank you," he said earnestly. "I mean it. Thank you." I acknowledged his gratitude with a slight nod, then took a long look at the two of them. Father and son. My family, and yet not my family anymore. Dad was weeping quietly, muttering words of thanks and praise to God. To fate, to me, it was hard to tell. It was as if by granting the scholarship, I had absolved him of a great fear. But I wasn't done absolving myself. I rose to my feet. They did too, instinctively, as if the meeting were formally adjourned. I looked my father in the eye. "I needed you to acknowledge what you did, and now you have. I hope losing your daughter is a burden you carry for a long time, because it was your own doing." He winced. "I rebuilt my life without you," I continued firmly. "I need nothing from you, not your approval, not your apology. Remember that whenever you think about what happened. You didn't make me who I am. I did in spite of you." He let out a broken sob. "I am so sorry," he croaked. I nodded coolly. "I know, but I can't forgive you. Maybe one day, maybe never. This isn't about forgiveness anyway. It's about me closing this chapter. You have no control over my life anymore, and I want you to truly understand that." He bowed his head, accepting the verdict. My brother wiped his eyes. "I'll work hard and make the most of this, my name. I promise. And one day, I'll pay it forward to help someone else. So your sacrifice means something." I managed a small, sad smile. "I hope you do, Ryan." Our business concluded, I gathered up the application papers and slid them into my folder. "The university will be in touch with the official award notice," I said briskly, back to a businesslike tone. "Congratulations, Ryan." I looked between them. "And now, if you don't mind, I'd like to ask you both to leave. I have another appointment." They understood it for what it was, a dismissal, and perhaps a farewell. My father opened his mouth as if to say something more, a final apology or a plea to stay in contact. But one glance at my face must have convinced him otherwise. He nodded miserably. "Thank you," he murmured almost inaudibly. I didn't respond to that. I simply watched as they turned and walked to the door. Ryan gave me one last long, searching look, a mixture of gratitude and regret, and I offered him a faint nod that I hoped conveyed the complicated forgiveness I felt for him. Dad did not look back at all as he shuffled out, shoulders bent under an invisible burden. When the door closed behind them, I was left alone in the silent conference room. I sank back into my chair and let out a shaky breath I hadn't realized I was holding. My hands were trembling, adrenaline still coursing through me. I pressed them flat on the cool table surface to steady myself. It was done. The climax of our tangled family saga had played out not with dramatic fireworks, but with a quiet, cathartic release. I expected victory to taste sweet. Instead, I felt a weary relief. Justice had been served, and the truth finally spoken. By granting Ryan the scholarship on my terms, I refused to continue our family's cycle of cruelty. I chose to be better, even if my fairness was delivered with a chilling coldness. As I left the alumni hall that day, stepping out into the late afternoon sun, I realized that the confrontation which had loomed over my dreams for so long was finally behind me. The chapter was closing, and I was ready to begin the next one on my own terms. News of our confrontation spread quietly through what remained of my family. I learned later that my father went home that day and for the first time told my mother the whole truth about forcing me out of school, about our meeting, about who the mysterious scholarship benefactor really was. My mother, I'm told, broke down sobbing. All those years of unspoken guilt and grief came pouring out of her. A week after the confrontation, I received a handwritten letter from my mother. In it, she apologized over and over for not fighting harder for me, for allowing Dad's decision to stand, for letting me slip away. She begged for a chance to see me, even if just once, to tell me in person how sorry she was. Tears smudged the ink in places. I could picture her at the kitchen table, pen in shaking hand. Reading her words, I realized that my revenge, my quest for justice, had consequences beyond just my father. It had dredged up old pain for my mother too, a woman who had been as much a victim of my father's iron will as I was. Unlike him, she had always loved me, even if she'd been too timid to oppose him. I decided to meet her. We arranged a quiet reunion at a small park in my hometown. When my mother saw me, she ran to me and pulled me into an embrace so tight it was as if she feared I'd disappear again. We both cried then, cleansing cathartic tears. She told me how proud she was of the life I built and how not contacting me had weighed on her every single day. I in turn assured her I didn't blame her the way I blamed Dad. We talked for hours, making up for lost time as best we could. It was not a relationship fully restored. Too much had happened. But it was a start. In reclaiming my own peace, I found I could extend a hand to my mother, allowing her a share of that peace too. As for my father, the consequence he faced was largely internal, but heavy. According to my mother, he hasn't been the same man since that day. The weight of shame and regret bows his head now. He's quieter, prone to long silences. One evening, Mom found him in his study, staring at an old photo of me from high school, tears in his eyes. She told me he keeps that photo on his desk now, a daily reminder of the price of his choices. In a way, I think that's the greatest justice I could have asked for. He finally understands what he did and lives with that knowledge every day. He attempted to write me a letter as well. 10 pages of anguished apologies and belated fatherly love, but I haven't been able to read it yet. Perhaps I will someday when my own heart has softened. For now, I keep it unopened in a drawer next to the remnants of my old life. The crumpled acceptance letter that he once ignored, my valedictorian certificate that was never awarded, and a photo of the young girl I was, full of hope until hope was taken away. Those mementos remind me how far I've come and why I can't simply forgive and forget. And what of my brother, the golden child around whom my life once revolved? Ryan did indeed use the scholarship I funded. He completed his prestigious graduate program, and true to his word, he made the most of it. A few months ago, I received an email from him brimming with updates. He had landed a solid job in his field and was volunteering as a tutor for underprivileged kids on weekends. "I want to pay forward the chance you gave me," he wrote. "I know I can't undo the past, but I can try to do some good in the future." I replied with simple congratulations and encouragement. We aren't suddenly close or in each other's lives regularly, but the warmth in our brief correspondence tells me that in time, perhaps we'll rebuild some semblance of sibling friendship. That is a future I'm open to, if he is. In the aftermath of it all, I often reflect on the true cost of my revenge and whether it was worth it. The cost was undeniably high. It severed any illusions of a happy family and cemented the estrangement with my father. But in truth, that bond was broken long ago. My act of justice merely acknowledged it. What I gained was something less tangible but far more valuable: closure, self-respect, and the end of a long internal war. For years after leaving home, I had carried the weight of my father's betrayal like a stone in my chest. Every achievement, every milestone was haunted by the shadow of what had been done to me. After confronting him, after hearing him finally admit his wrongdoing, that stone has grown lighter. I no longer need anything from him. Not approval, not revenge, not even acknowledgement. I got what I needed: the truth out in the open and the chance to speak my piece. My revenge was never about ruining my father's life or exacting some grandiose punishment. It was about balance. He took something dear from me, and I made him face that fact and give something back to his other child. I didn't destroy him. I didn't have to. In a sense, my success and independence are punishment enough because they shine a light on how misguided he was to doubt me. I suspect he knows that too. In one of the short messages he sent via my mother, he said, "You are the best investment I never made." A bittersweet sentiment, to be sure. I carry on with my life quieter and calmer now that this chapter has closed. At my company, I've channeled some of my energy into expanding our scholarship fund, reaching more students who need a break. Each year, when I review the applications, I think of how a similar act of support, or the lack thereof, altered the course of my own family. It fuels my commitment to be a force for good, to ensure that in families out there, another young person doesn't have to choose whose future matters more. In the end, justice in my story came with a dose of sorrow. There's no denying that I lost a father in the process, but then I had lost him long ago. The person I confronted in that conference room was more a cautionary tale than a parent to me. I take no joy in his suffering. I take resolve in it, because through suffering he learned empathy, something he had sorely lacked. I like to believe that my younger self, that heartbroken girl who once sat on a porch, feeling utterly discarded, can finally rest easy inside me. She's witnessed that we clawed our way to a better life. She's seen that we stood up to the man who pushed us aside, and we emerged victorious in the ways that truly matter. The price was steep, but the reward is a life I can fully claim as my own, free of resentment's shadow. I sometimes catch myself standing in front of the mirror, the ghost of that girl in my reflection. I tell her, we did it. We're free now. And in the peaceful silence of my home, a home I built with determination and perseverance, I feel the truth of it wash over me. Justice was served. Consequences were faced. And at long last, I am at peace with what happened a decade ago. 10 years ago, I felt voiceless and powerless, a casualty of my father's ruthless favoritism. Today, I speak with my own hard-won voice, free and hopeful for the future. My story is one of pain and perseverance of injustice, met with quiet resilience and ultimately a personal kind of justice. It wasn't an easy journey, and confronting my past certainly wasn't easy, but I'm grateful I found the strength to do it. In sharing this story, I hope it resonates with those who have faced betrayal or felt unheard. We all have scars from the battles we fight, especially those fought within our own families. Mine taught me that, while we cannot choose the family we're born into, we can choose who we become. I chose to become someone who didn't surrender to bitterness, who fought for success, and used it not just to uplift myself, but to shine a light for others. Confronting my father and brother was the closing of a wound that had ached in me for years. It didn't erase the past, nothing can, but it allowed me to finally heal. I walk forward now without the weight of that old hurt on my shoulders. I've reconciled with the parts of my life that made me who I am, and I've let go of the notion that their validation is needed for my happiness. My life is mine, defined by me alone. Thank you for listening to my journey. It's not just my story. It's a testament to anyone who has been cast aside or underestimated. If you have ever been in my shoes, forced to sacrifice for someone else yearning for justice, I hope you found a bit of solace or inspiration in my words. Sometimes the greatest revenge isn't loud or dramatic at all. It's the quiet flourishing of a life well lived. My revenge didn't come from shouting or violence. It came from success, from turning the very pain that nearly broke me into fuel for my ambition. In the silence of countless long nights working toward my goals, I cultivated a future that no one could steal from me. And in the end, confronting my father, not with rage, but with poise and achievement, was more devastating to him than any scream of anger could have been. If you're out there facing your own injustice, know this: living well truly is a powerful answer to those who wronged you. It's not about pleasing them or proving something to them. It's about proving to yourself that you are more than the sum of what was done to you. My life now is testimony to that truth. I turned my nothing into something extraordinary. So can you. I also often wonder, what would you have done in my situation? Would you have given that scholarship to your sibling, or would you have denied it to make your father fully feel the sting of his actions? There's no one right answer, and I struggled with that decision myself. I'm curious how you listening to my story view it. Was my response too cold, or was it exactly what was deserved? Perhaps you've had to stand up to someone who betrayed you, a parent, a relative, or a friend. How did you handle it? Did you seek reconciliation, or did you walk away and find closure on your own? Sharing these experiences can be healing, not just for you, but for others. Reading who might find courage and wisdom in your words. The truth is, we all deserve to be treated with love and respect. When that doesn't happen, when those who should protect us wound us instead, it leaves marks. My story shows that those marks can become a map, a guide, to a stronger self. I carried my scars and let them remind me of what I would never inflict on another. That's why I chose to help my brother rather than hurt him. In doing so, I broke the cycle of hurt in my family and set a new tone for the future. At this point, I am moving forward with optimism. I've let go of the anger that drove me for so long. I focus now on the positive. My company, the students, I can help the family ties, like with my mom and brother, that might still be rebuilt slowly, with honesty and time. The past will always be the past, but it doesn't have to define the future. Once again, thank you for hearing my story all the way through. It means more to me than I can express. Please don't forget to leave a comment with your thoughts or your own stories, and share this video if you found value in it. There's someone out there who might be feeling what I once felt, and they might need to know that silent perseverance can lead to meaningful revenge and redemption. Until next time, remember, even when life is unfair, even when you're forced into the shadows, stay strong, stay true to yourself, and keep the hope alive. Justice may find you in time, and you might just find that the life you build is the brightest response to the darkness you endured.